This story is why you should never mess with the Ouija boards. We moved into my dad's girlfriend's house where one of her daughters lived upstairs, my brother lived upstairs, her other daughter lived down in the basement, along with me who lived in a makeshift room in the basement. One night, me and her two daughters decided to buy an Ouija board. After my dad and his girlfriend went to bed, me and her daughters all went downstairs, grabbed a bunch of candles, set up the Ouija board, and grabbed a bunch of our great-grandparents' stuff. We wanted to see if any of our great-grandparents would talk to us. We were so excited because the Ouija board was working and things were moving it. We asked what the spirit's name was, expecting it to be one of our great-grandparents, but it said its name was Tick. T-I-C. We asked it to repeat it again, and it spelled out T-I-C. We knew that it wasn't one of our great-grandparents. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of why you should never do an Ouija board. So after it said its name was Tick, we asked how old it was. The spirit responded with 9 years old. We asked what gender it was. There was no response. We knew for sure at this point we were not talking to one of our great-grandparents. I wanted to stop right then and there. I was really freaked out and I knew that we weren't talking to something good, but my older stepsister wanted to keep going. So out of peer pressure, of course, I kept going. She asked if it was human. Its response was no. We asked if we were safe. The spirit said yes, but I really didn't feel safe. We asked if the spirit was stuck in the house. The response was yes. The next thing my older stepsister asked, which I really wish she didn't, is if Tick was the only one there with us. The response was no. 60 seconds is not enough time for the story, and the story is really long, so stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 to the Ouija board story, and why you should never use an Ouija board. So my older stepsister asked if Tick was the only one there with us. The answer was no. She asked if all the spirits there with us were good spirits. The Ouija board said no. Right as we asked that, the bathroom was right behind us and we heard a huge loud slam in the bathroom. All of us were really freaked out, just sitting there not knowing what to do. The candles started flickering. There was so much tension in the room. I have never felt anything like it. That is when my other stepsister screamed at the top of her lungs and told me to move. She saw a black hand approaching from behind me and was going to grab my face. Because she screamed so loud, my dad woke up and we heard him, so we said goodbye really quickly. I went upstairs really quick to calm my dad down and say everything was fine. But after that night, we awoke something and a lot more things happened. Stay tuned for part 4. This is part 4 of the Ouija board. So after we used the Ouija board, we definitely awoke something in the house. The energy downstairs was so intense that none of us could sleep down there. Because of this, me and my older stepsister slept upstairs for literally weeks. Remember the shadow of the hand that wrapped around my face in part 3? Well, that hand didn't disappear. My stepmom said she saw it multiple times when she would go downstairs and change the laundry. It got to the point where her and my dad didn't even want to go downstairs. The cat would chase things that weren't even there. Doors would slam. Floorboards would creak at night. My dad would constantly see my cat chasing a figure, and all you could see was the figure's spine. It would run on all fours. The hauntings got so bad that my dad decided that we needed to move out. Ever since then, nobody has lived in that house for longer than 2 months.
When I was 16, my friend Lexi and I were trying to get super fit one summer. So we made a pact that we were going to swim around this one rock every day that summer. The swim wasn't that long, it only took like 15 minutes. But the rule was that you had to swim around the backside of the rock. You couldn't just go out and back. You had to go behind it. And the backside of the rock was always a little scary because once you got behind the rock, no one on the beach could see you anymore. So if anything happened to you, you'd be on your own. But we were ridiculously intense about it. Like we went turbo beast mode. We said that no matter the weather, no matter the size of the waves, the strength of the rip current, we would swim around the rock for the entire month of July every day. And we were super serious about this commitment. Like one day, Lexi ate a really bad pepperoni calzone and had the worst food poisoning. And she was literally shitting her pants and I was like, Lexi, you don't have to swim with me today. And she still swam with me that day. Then one day, in the middle of July 16th actually to be exact, because I remember, we were swimming around the rock and something bad happened. So Lexi and I are swimming and we're like halfway through the swim on the backside of the rock. And while we're swimming, something hits me on the back. It literally felt like someone punched me underwater. And I scream and Lexi's like, what happened? But I was freaked out and I didn't explain it to her. So I just told her to swim to the rock, get out of the ocean and get on top of it. Once we were safe on the rock, I told Lexi what had happened and she was super freaked out. And I actually had a red mark on my back. So she knew I wasn't making any of it up. We stayed on the rock staring at the water, trying to spot anything moving for like 30 minutes. But after a while we were like, okay, well, we have to swim back at some point. point, so we decided to swim in. We literally swam as fast as we could back to the shore. When we got to the shore, there was an old woman on the beach looking at us kind of weirdly. She's like, "Where's your other friend?" And we were confused. We were like, "What?" She's like, "You had a third girl swimming with you, didn't you?" And we were like, no, it's just us." And she's like, "Well, I definitely saw a third girl out there with you guys." But then, a few days later, the local newspaper came out with a story titled "Something in the Water." People at another beach a few miles away claimed that they were getting hit by something in the water. So people were claiming at this other beach in town that something was hitting them in the water. And they couldn't see what it was, but a few people had described the same sensation. The feeling of a really hard, blunt kind of punch in the water. So Lexi and I start to suspect that whatever's hitting people at that beach also hit me a few days earlier. And even though it was only July 19th, Lexi and I decided that it wasn't safe to swim behind the rock anymore. But I still would obviously go to the beach, and my favorite time to go was early in the mornings. And usually it would just be me at the beach at that time of day, but one morning I came down and the same old lady was standing there on the shore of the beach. She was just standing there with her feet in the water, but when I walked by, she turned around and she goes, "It must be a beautiful life out there. I bet they're happy." And then she bent down and picked something up from the sand and handed it to me. It was a type of shell that I had seen all the time. And she goes, "Do you know what these are? These are mermaid nails. We must have one living nearby this summer." And then she winks. A few nights later, I was at the beach again at a beach fire. And that's when I made a huge mistake. So a few nights later, we were having a beach fire, and it was really fun. Everyone was drinking, it was getting pretty rowdy. And then one of my friends proposes that we play Truth or Dare. So we're going around, and of course I'm feeling tipsy and therefore bold. So when it's my turn, I choose Dare. And this guy, Eddie, dared me to go climb up one of the big rocks, jump off into the ocean, and swim all the way in. But since hearing about this creature in the ocean, I hadn't gone in past my waist. But as I said, I was feeling drunk and brave, so I said fine. So I stripped down ass naked, and I start walking towards the rock, and everyone's drunkenly cheering, but as I get further away, their cheers become quieter, and soon it's just me and the wind and the sound of the ocean. And I'm starting to get cold because even in July, the nights can get kind of chilly, and I'm standing on top of the rock about to jump in, but I close my eyes and I just jump in, and the water actually feels warmer than the air, and it feels good, and I'm happy I'm in it. But then I hear a small splash behind me. All of a sudden, I feel something take my hand, like grab it really aggressively. It feels like another hand holding mine, trying to pull me down. And I freak out and I scream and I pull my hand away and I start swimming faster than I ever have in my whole life. And then I feel the same thing grab my ankle, and I kick and it's still holding on to it, but finally I kick really hard and I get it to let go, and I'm swimming even faster. Once I got to the point where I could touch, I just start sprinting through the water onto the shore. So I sprint back to the fire and I'm trying to tell my drunk friends what had happened, but they think I'm trying to trick them, and they're like, "Haha, nice, I can't believe you actually got in the water." So in the summer, I like to wear a lot of anklets because I think they look really cute on like tan, bare feet. So I had a lot of anklets that summer, like rope braided anklets. So the next morning, I'm in bed and I feel something sharp against my ankle. So I pull my foot out from under the covers and I look, and stuck in one of my anklets is a shell. And I look a little closer and it's the same shell that the old lady showed me on the beach, a mermaid's nail.
I'm going to be telling you a true scary story about why you should always cover your camera on your computer. I work from home, so I use my computer a lot. And one day I was just sitting there responding to emails when all of a sudden the green little dot by the camera came on. It went away right away, so I didn't think much of it. But then it continued to happen every single day. I just thought my computer was glitching, so I took it right to the Apple Store. They cleared my computer of all the bugs, and it seemed perfectly fine. That was until I got a very suspicious thing in the mail. It was literal pictures of myself on my computer. And there was no return address, so I had no idea where they came from. It freaked me out so much that I went to go get a new computer that very same day. But unfortunately, things did not stop after that. They had hacked into everything of mine. I kept getting mail that was just addressed to me with no return address with all my information on it. That is when I realized I had a stalker and he knew exactly where I lived.
Okay, so story time. So basically one time in 5th grade, my dad took me to get breakfast from Dunkin' Donuts. We went there before school like always, and as we were there, this strange man outside was staring at me and like making faces. Super creepy. We didn't know him or anything, so we walked inside and I was kind of freaked out. I told my dad that I was creeped out by him, and he told me that nothing bad was gonna happen. Or so he thought. So we got our foods and we ate it. Everything was fine, chill. After we were done, we got up to leave. The man was gone by now, so I felt better. But then on the way to my school, I saw him walking on the sidewalk. Like, I figured he was going to his house or like somewhere else. When we got to my school, no one was outside. It was kind of weird. We went to open the door because my dad was a part of the PTA, so he came in with me. The door for some reason was locked. My music teacher out of nowhere ran out and brought us inside quickly. She told us that our whole school was on code red. scary. And that a man was in our school, so we went inside and I went and hid in the music room. Like for part 2. Okay, so part 2. So I went and hid in the music room. Dad was in the PTA room, which was close by. Literally started crying because I was so scared and they weren't telling us anything because we were too young. I guess they didn't want to scare us. That didn't work. Once the code red was over, about 30 minutes later, we went to class. I went to go find my dad and make sure he was okay and see if he knew anything, and he didn't. When I got in my classroom, we were all talking about it, and my teacher said that the man just walked in and told them he was looking for one of his teachers from like 15 years back. Huh? They gave us a description of the man, and I realized it was the same man from Dunkin' Donuts. He just walked in my school. I was freaked out because I saw him at Dunkin' Donuts before school started, and I hoped I never saw him again. But a few weeks later, I saw him again multiple times at the same Dunkin' Donuts. He literally just stared at me all the time. So yeah, that's my little story.
This is the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Yes, this girl really faked her death. So at the time, I was 5 and my little brother was 3. It started off with my mom saying that she didn't feel well and she couldn't pick me up from school, so the bus would have to take me home. Well, a few months after, she started getting picked up from our house by this black car. She said that car was picking her up because of her so-called doctor's appointments. And she wasn't able to drive herself because she was too sick. Well, one day, when this car came to pick her up, she never came home. Me and my little brother were sitting around for a couple days waiting for her to come home, but she never came home, and we were young, so we didn't do anything. Eventually, my aunt came over to our house and told my little brother and I that our mom had passed away, and that she was cremated and they kept the ashes. So our aunt started taking care of us. Until one day, I saw my aunt getting picked up by that same black car. That's when I started to get suspicious of everything, and I decided to check these ashes. When I checked, it was flour. Like for part 2. This is part 2 of the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Like I said, my aunt told me that my mom had died and they cremated her and they let her keep the ashes and that she was going to start taking care of us. Me not knowing how long the cremating process actually took at the time since I was so young, I believed her. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by the same black car that my mom used to get picked up by before she died. That's when I decided to check these supposed ashes, and it was actually flour. So one day when my aunt got picked up by this black car, I decided to follow her. I didn't have a car. I was 5 years old, so I had to follow them by walking and hiding behind bushes. I was able to follow them up the street, and once they turned the corner, and there I saw my mom standing on the side of the street. That's when I see the car stop and I see my aunt get out and approach my mother. She tells my mom to give her money for covering for her and taking care of me and my little brother. Mom says she faked her death because my dad wasn't in our lives and she didn't want to take care of us anymore. I'm older now and I cut her off completely, and I have full custody of my little brother.
I'm going to be telling you a true scary story about the children who lived in my woods called the Lost Boys. As a kid, I would always play in the woods behind my house. And as a kid, I loved playing in them because I had a whole bunch of friends who lived in the woods. And you might be thinking, kids don't live in the woods. And that's exactly right, because they were actual ghosts. But as a kid, I did not know that. I would go out every single day, and there was about 10 boys who would play with me. We would build tree forts, we would play hide and seek, chase, everything. I invited them over for dinner all the time, but they told me that they couldn't leave, that they were stuck in the woods. I didn't understand, but I just let them be. I would always bring my friends out there, and none of them could see them. Everyone just told me I was crazy. But that was until I went missing for 2 days because one of the boys told me to come with him. So I did. He took me really, really far back into the woods, and I was super lost. And things started to go really bad. Stay tuned for part 2.
One day, we were in class. I was in band at the time, and the classroom phone rang. And the teacher went and he answered the phone. He got really serious. He got this really concerned, shocked look on his face, and he hung it up and he turned to us and he said, "Everybody sit down, be quiet. The bell's going to ring in a couple minutes. You're going to stay seated." And then he went over to the doors and he locked them. And we were just like, oh shit, what is happening? And at first some of us were like, well, is it a bomb threat? Because we used to get bomb threats all the time, but then we realized that doesn't make sense because when we get a bomb threat, they evacuate us. And then we're like, is there some type of killer in the school? Is there a weather alert? Is there a terrorist attack? And none of us knew anything. The teacher wouldn't answer any questions. He was told not to. And the bell rang, and we all stayed seated, and we sat there for a really, really long time. And then the next bell rang, which means a whole other class period had passed, and still he said stay seated. And I can't tell you how long we were trapped in this room and nobody was telling us what was going on. We're all getting really scared and panicking.
We had never had a situation like this, and we had practiced so many drills, so many, if there's a bomb, we all go to the band lot. If there's a tornado, we all go to the basement. If there's a fire, we take these exits on this side. we always had a plan, and this was just something that we had never planned, and nobody was telling us anything. So eventually, they're texting their parents and calling their parents, and they're saying, do you know anything about this? And the parents are all freaking out, and now it's like an ordeal. Some of the parents started listening to the police scanners, and it was getting back to us that there were ambulances outside of our school, and we're just like, and at this point, a lot of us are panicking because we think there's some type of shooter or something, because that makes sense. Like, okay, the doors are locked. They're telling us to be quiet. They're telling us not to move. They're telling us not to leave. There's ambulances outside. And finally, they just open the doors and let us go. And they wouldn't tell us anything still. So we're just like, okay, we just sat in this classroom for like hours. There's ambulances outside of our school. And you're just room for like hours. There's ambulances outside of our school, and you're just gonna let us go to our next class? So you can probably tell by the title of this video what happened. A girl died in class during school hours. And here's the story on that. So earlier in that day, around like first, second period, somebody sold her a bunch of Oxycontins. She, during school, took all of them. She ended up going to her 7th period class at 3rd period, and she walked in and the teacher was like, honey, what are you doing here? And she said, oh, I'm here for class. And the teacher was like, you're not here until later, honey. It's only 3rd period. And I wasn't here for this, but supposedly when she walked away, she said to somebody else, oh, she's on something, or she's drunk or something. But it was obvious that she was on something. So she went a couple classes later and she put her head down on the desk. She was sleeping, and she was just kind of one of those students who, you know, showed up late and slept in class. Obviously didn't show a ton of interest. He was an amazing teacher. He was a caring teacher, but he didn't wake her up. For I don't know what reason it was. I don't know if he just thought, you know, you can only try so hard to make somebody interested in class. I don't know if he figured, you know what, she could really use the sleep, just let her nap. But that class was over and the bell rang and everybody got up, but she stayed seated laying on her desk like this with her head down, and she wasn't getting up. So somebody who was sitting next to her nudged her and was like, hey, wake up, class is over. And she didn't move, and then she nudged her a little harder to wake her up, and that is when her arm fell completely limp to the side of the desk. So obviously at this point, people start panicking. They roll her over and she is completely blue. I don't know how long she was out. I don't know how long she wasn't breathing, but she had completely OD'd and had not been receiving oxygen for enough time to turn her blue. That is when the ambulances were called. That is when the school was put on lockdown. She was taken out, obviously, and she died that day.
The first story starts when I was 2. I don't remember it much, but my parents have told me this multiple times. We lived in this little white house. It was very old. My parents used to always hear me laughing and playing in my room with someone, but there was no one in my room. When they asked who I was talking to, I told them it was a little boy named Omar. They thought it was just an imaginary friend, but now that I think back on it, when I was 3 and 4, I did see someone. He was always very kind to me. I would play Barbies and he would play with me. He would draw me pictures. I would leave my books out for him so he could read while I was at preschool. I would tell him about my days and he would tell me about his. But things started to get really weird once my brother was born, and that is when my parents started to see him too. They believe that this is because he wanted to be the only little boy in the house. Stay tuned for part 2. Here is part 2 of the series of the little boy. When my brother was born, my parents used to sense and see the little boy as well. My mom used to feel his energy sitting in the rocking chair. My brother's mechanical toys used to just start making noise. He started to show up less and less in my room, and every time he would, he kind of scared me. He wasn't himself anymore. He was mad, angry, everything. My parents believe it's just because he wanted to be seen and he was lonely, and now that I had a little brother, I wasn't paying as much attention to the little boy. My mom would wake up to my brother crying in the middle of the night and go check on him, and she would sense something standing next to her. Weeks later, we moved out of that house due to a shooting in our backyard. My old nanny, who lived across the street, told us after we moved out, she would always see something in the window of my room.
So you know when you're playing Roblox with your friends and they're like, oh, what game do you want to play? And you're like, oh, I don't mind, you pick. And they're like, oh no, I picked last night, you picked tonight. So you just pick a random game, let's use Murder Mystery, for example. And you're like, oh, let's play Murder Mystery. And then your friend's like, I don't like that game. Well, don't tell me to pick the game then. If you don't like the game that I want to play, don't ask me to pick the game in the first place if you're not gonna play the game I want to play. So then you suggest another game, like, oh, let's play Royal High. I don't like Royal High. No. If you want me to pick the game, you gotta be happy with the things that I tell you. You gotta be happy with the game that I pick. Because if you're just gonna say no to all the games that I pick, what's the point in asking me to pick? Chloe, I know you're probably going to see this, and I know you're listening to this. I will come for you and I will just tell me, TikTok, why don't you want me on the For You page? Like, can you please put me on the For You page like at least once in my whole life? I've tried millions of accounts, but my videos always flop. You better make this video viral, and you better make me feel like Charlie D'Amelio. If not, I am suing you for picking favorites. Go on. I'm waiting for my plus notifications.
I will never, and I mean never, forget the time that we had a male sub in high school and a girl asked to go to the restroom and he said sure. So she grabbed something and he heard a wrapper and he was like, oh, if you're gonna eat candy, you can do it in here, but you have to share with everyone in the class. And she was like, what? And he was like, well, I heard the wrapper. And she whips out a tampon, shoves it in his face, and she goes, you want to share? Oh, girl, savage.
Hey guys, send this to your best friend. Hey best friend, so the person who sent you this has some news for you. And I know I've made a video like this before, but I am genuinely being serious this time. And they really don't want you to freak out or hate them or anything like that. This is just something they've been wanting to tell you for a while, and they're really stressed about it, so they sent you this video. So you're probably wondering what they were going to tell you. Well, they were going to tell you that they are never gonna... Some teachers just really get on my nerves, you know? I don't know what planet they're on, but they definitely are just built different. Here's an example. When you need to go to the toilet, you politely put your hand up and say, Miss, can I go to the toilet? No, you should have gone at lunch. I'm sorry, Karen, but I can't control my bladder. You know, at lunch, when I'm eating and drinking, it gets digested, and then later on, I need to go to the toilet. It will take me 5 minutes at max. Probably not even 5 minutes. Considering our lessons are like an hour long, I'm sure that's not too much of an issue, is it?
My sister starts running, and there's a freaking man standing out there trying to get in my window, and it was 8 at night. Like, who does that? I'm so scared of what his intentions were. He had no bag, no phone, no anything, and that's so scary. So my dad starts chasing him down the street, and then all my neighbors come out to help my dad chase him. And then he goes down the black path, and the other neighbors are helping him. One of our neighbors yells, hey, we got him! So everyone starts running over there. After the police show up, they're shining a bunch of lights up the hill and asking us questions, and he's hiding up there somewhere.
Okay, so one time when I was in class I had the very aggressive urge to fart. I was scared it was more than a fart, so I asked the teacher to go to the bathroom and she said yes. I ran down the hallway with my hands on my butt preparing for the worst. I reached the bathroom and slammed the door shut and had the most stinky, slinky, dinky, double-decker Twinkie, extra pepperoni, piggy, sticky shard in the whole world. The walls started to cave in and I'm pretty sure I saw Jesus out the window. The fire alarm went off and everyone was screaming. They thought Thanos snapped his fingers. I screamed in the bathroom sounding like a dying goat. I stopped after 5 minutes and felt like I just killed half the all-known universe myself.
Hey guys, send this to your best friend. Hey best friend, so the person who sent you this has some news for you. And I know I've made a video like this before, but I am genuinely being serious this time. And they really don't want you to freak out or hate them or anything like that. This is just something they've been wanting to tell you for a while, and they're really stressed about it, so they sent you this video. So you're probably wondering what they were going to tell you. Well, they were going to tell you that they are never gonna...
So me and my sister were making TikToks in my room, and my dog starts barking at my window crazy, and I look out the window a few times and I see nothing, and then we go outside. She is the one shining the light and she says she sees nothing, and I don't see anything either, so I just forget about it. I'm like, oh, it's just a rat or something trying to get in my window and stuff like that. And then I hear scratching, and I'm like, it's getting louder. And my parents are like, it's probably just a squirrel. Then I just wait a few seconds and it's getting even louder, so I tell my dad, and he opens the garage door and goes outside, and he starts screaming. He's like, hey, get back, get back.
Your friend sent you this video because they realized that they send you a lot of TikToks. So all they have to say to you is, you think you have a way out of this? I'm going to keep sending you TikToks, and you're going to watch every single one of them, and you're going to enjoy it. And you think you can just simply walk away? You think you can block them? No. You don't have an escape. We will find you!
Once upon a time, there was a kid called Jack. Jack was really bored, so he decided to make some rice. So he started boiling the rice, and out of nowhere, he decided to start salsa dancing. Then when he was salsa dancing, he tripped over air and fell into the bowl of rice and started to boil himself. Then Jack became rice and was served on a plate. The end.
I was in class on Zoom. I wanted to go to sleep, honestly, because like when I'm tired, I go to sleep. I end up falling asleep and then class ends and everyone starts leaving the class. Except me, because I was like in a whole other universe at this point. I was dreaming, I was flying. At this point, me and the teacher are alone in the call. This is the best part! Then the teacher starts talking to me and he's like, Samantha, wake up. Samantha, please. Samantha, you have another class. He woke me up, but I was half awake, so I didn't really know what was going on. So I thought it was my brother waking me up, and I straight up yelled. I was like, shut up, you fat booger. And so then I realized, oh shit, I just called my teacher a fat booger. And now he scheduled a parent conference.